Hello, here we are today with a hands-on comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S4 against the S4 Zoom, one of the latest devices to be added to the Galaxy range of smartphones and mobile devices. So point to note out here that I have my own personal Galaxy S4, so this has been tweaked a little bit, but both of these are SIM-free unlocked units and these are UK specs, so this comparison may differ slightly to others out there depending on what devices you're comparing. So we're going to cover all the main differences, and let's start with the processor. So the Samsung Galaxy S4 has a 1.9 GHz quad-core processor, whereas the S4 Zoom has a 1.5 GHz dual-core processor. Now, off the top, that sounds like the S4 is better, but it's not necessarily the case. Unless you're an ardent gamer or do lots and lots of multitasking, then it's not really a massive issue. Yes, you do notice it when you're side by side with the S4 Zoom, but all told, we actually find the performance of the S4 Zoom pretty good, and that is helped by the fact that it's got 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, and this is another differentiator. So 1.5 gig of RAM in here, 2 gig in the S4, but that's only 0.5 a gig or 500 megabytes difference in RAM, so that RAM is really helping control the apps and the memory usage on the S4 Zoom. So whilst you might not have the processing power of the S4, you've got quite a lot of memory there, and it's only really in extreme cases, if you're a high-end user with multitasking in games, may you find the S4 Zoom actually struggling. So that's the RAM. So if we now take a look at the memory, the S4 comes most commonly in 16 gigabyte memory format. There are apparently 32 and 64 gig units available, and the S4 Zoom comes in with just 8 gigabytes. But here is where they differ. The S4 has been well documented as only having around about 9 of the 16 gig available for storage because of the size of the OS install. Now the S4 Zoom, whilst it's got 8 gig, has around 5 gig of usable memory, so the S4 Zoom in terms of gigabytes is actually winning out of the box. But both of these have micro SD card slots, so we can see here that the S4 Zoom, we just pop open this cover and you can pop in a micro SD card, and that's up to 64 gig there. And then the S4 is exactly the same. If we remove the back cover, we've got a micro SD card slot just there, so we can expand the memory up to 64 gig, and that's particularly useful on the S4 Zoom because we're probably going to be taking loads of pictures with it. So then if we look at the display, now that's the other big difference, and really perhaps where the likes of the S4 branding isn't really fair to apply to the S4 Zoom. The S4 has a 4.99-inch Super AMOLED display, whereas the S4 Zoom has a 4.3-inch display. Now their resolutions are 1920 by 1080 on the S4 and 960 by 540 on the S4 Zoom. So the S4 Zoom is considerably more like the S4 Mini than it is the S4. But having said that, that does save on battery life because it's smaller. Now the quality isn't as good when you sort of zoom in, but it's only really when you put these two side by side and make a direct comparison can you actually see the difference. In our actual usage of the S4 Zoom, we've actually found the screen to be very pleasing, and you'd be hard pushed to criticize it because it still does have that Super AMOLED display, which is very good all told. Now the other consideration is connectivity. The S4 Zoom is unique in the fact that it is a phone and it is connected all the time, but it's also a camera as well with this lens, which we'll come on to in a moment. The one big difference between these two devices is the S4 has 4G connectivity out of the box, where the S4 Zoom only has 3G connectivity, but it does have HSPA+, which basically means you're going to get fast connectivity anyway, and at the time of recording, 4G is still in its infancy pretty much in most countries, so whilst the S4 is a bit more future-proofed, the S4 Zoom shouldn't really be criticised for that lack of 4G. So now if we come on to the killer feature, and this is where the S4 zoom really stands out, we're talking about this, the camera. Now on the Samsung Galaxy S4 we've got a rear-facing 13 megapixel camera with LED flash. It's got 1080p video recording, but this S4 zoom has got a 16 megapixel camera. It also records at 1080p at 30 frames per second, but rather than an LED flash, we've got a xenon flash, and we've got 10 times optical zoom. So if we just launch into the camera application to show you this, there it is. You see the lens has actually opened, and if we then twist this here, this little ring allows us to adjust the zoom, you'll see that the lens is moving to give you that zoom. Now you don't get that on the S4. What you get on the S4 is 4 times digital zoom, but you get 10 times optical zoom on the S4 zoom, and well, that really does make a difference. The downside is the weight and the way it looks, but what you do have is this nice camera grip and this dedicated camera shutter button, which you don't actually have on the S4. You just have to use on screen, or you program the likes of the volume button to be your camera button. So just very quickly looking at the camera interface here, you can see as I move the dial on the front of the S4 zoom, it's actually zooming there on screen. Now you do have these plus and minus icons which you can use for zooming, and that actually gives you much smoother zooming controls. In terms of the interface, it's very similar between the S4 and the S4 zoom. We've got the ability to take a picture and video from the camera screen here. We can click this mode button, and this is where there are a few differences. The S4 has smart mode, but the S4 zoom has auto, smart, expert and my mode. So in smart mode you get a few pre-configured options where basically the camera settings have been optimized for you and you can choose what you want. So you get that on both devices. But if I just come out of here and go to this again, we can go into expert mode, and this is where you can get real control over the camera, the settings and the features. You've got the ability to basically set this up like you would a dedicated camera or digital SLR and control it completely, you know, to get the best settings for you. So that's a massive bonus over the S4. I should also point out at this point, the S4 zoom has a tripod mount here. It's got a little cover in it which you can remove, but you can mount it to a tripod. That's very useful. You can't get that on the S4. And then the other thing is just here, you can actually attach the likes of a lanyard or a hand strap through here, which is very useful to actually control the device and carry it. You've also got this design here and a dedicated camera shutter button, and you can view our blog.clove.co.uk for the written comparison and examples of some of the videos and photos that you get from both of these devices. So if we then come down to look actually at the physical form factor, well, you don't have to be a genius to realize how these two compare in size. There is no comparison. The S4 is slimmer, it's lighter, this weighs in around 200 odd grams, whereas the S4's in the low 100s. You know, profile size is completely different. Coming in and out of a pocket, well, the Galaxy S4 zoom is considerably heavier for that, but you do have this nice grip for actually holding it. It doesn't balance very well on a tabletop. If we sit it there, you'll notice it actually leans into the lens, which is a bit of a frustration. And the other thing is there's no lip around the side here, so if you let it flat down, the screen's exposed to the desktop, as is the S4, but that's you know, not a deal breaker, but it's just something to note when you use it as a camera. When we look at the actual battery capacities, there's not an awful lot in it. The S4 has a 2600 milliamp hour battery, which is user removable, if we just show you that there. Now the S4 zoom also has a user removable battery, but this is 2330 milliamp hours, and that comes in under here. You just unpop this and the battery will pop out. So both are removable, which means you can always have a spare one charging on a dock or something like that. Now, in terms of actual battery performance, the S4 Zoom should actually do pretty well here because it's got a bigger battery in comparison to the screen size with the S4, but with all the power of this actual zoom lens and everything, you end up chewing through the battery. So at the end of a normal day, both devices need charging, so it's fair to say, whilst initially the S4 Zoom looks better for battery life, you know, they're both going to need charging at the end of the day. Just popping back on the fact of size, this does have an impact on the accessories that are available for the S4 Zoom. You can see here we've got a micro USB charging port, which is also used for USB hosting and MHL out, but you can't really sit this on normal docks or anything like that. You're going to need to use universal ones, and even then it can potentially be a problem. So that is one sort of issue between the two devices that could be a make or break thing for you. If we look at the price, now the price is always changing, but at the time of recording the S4 is priced at £440 plus VAT, it's about 528, against the S4 Zoom, which is £369 or £443 including, so there's about an £85 difference between the two. Over a 24-month period, that's not a lot of difference to consider. It's whether you actually want to go for the higher spec sort of S4, but then you lose out on the actual camera functionality. Now, if you are looking for something to replace your compact camera, the S4 Zoom could be a good option, but if we considered the cost of having a separate smartphone and a separate camera, if we took the S4 Mini as an example and then a digital camera, you're going to be looking at a cost in excess of £500. So the S4 Zoom could work out a more cost-effective solution, being say £50 to £100 actually cheaper depending on the device you go for. Now, one other thing I actually want to point out here is the software. Now, the S4 got shouted about. There was loads of software options on this device that Samsung announced at the launch, but the S4 Zoom has not got quite all of the same features. You've still got Android on here, but you've got some of the advanced settings which are actually missing. Now, these won't necessarily be make or break features for you, but it's worth noting that the S4 Zoom doesn't actually have quite the same software iteration. So if we look at the likes of motion and gestures here, you can see already that our menu system is different, and you've got air gestures on the S4 which you don't have on the S4 Zoom, and that's to keep the cost down and also, you know, keep the S4 kind of exclusive. So if we come back out of there, that's one thing to note. And then you'll also see we've got smart screen, but air view is here on the S4 where it isn't on the S4 Zoom. Now, you'll also see voice control, which they've both got. I should mention that you can control the camera with your voice on both devices. However, the S4 Zoom has got a few more features in the fact that you can control things like the timer and actually recording video, whereas you don't have those features on the S4 itself. So that's kind of it really in the main software differences there, and you can see some of those features have been missed out on the S4 Zoom to save up on the operating system. One final little difference is what Samsung have included on the S4 Zoom, and if we scroll through the apps here, you'll see we've got Photo Suggest, and it kind of basically does what it says on the tin. It suggests based on your GPS position where you should go and take photos based on pictures that other people have taken in Google's database with GPS positioning. So that's a nice touch if you're into your photography and you really want to get the best shot. One other small little annoyance is when you come to the home screens on the S4 Zoom, they're all oriented in portrait mode, and really the S4 kind of pushes you to use it in landscape mode, but the home screens don't orientate in landscape mode. Apps like messaging and that do, but not the home screens, and that's a little bit of a frustration. Now, that's the same for the S4, but you can get around this with other launchers and that, and that's what I've done on this device. So I've got a different launcher, and if I turn this round, I now have the home screen in landscape mode. It's just a small bug which hopefully Samsung can deal with in a future update, and I think it would make the S4 Zoom all that much better. So in conclusion, which device do you go for? Well, it's not that simple. There's not an awful lot of difference between the two in terms of actual price. There is a bit in terms of the actual hardware specification. If you don't want something that's big and bulky, then don't go for the S4 Zoom, you know, go for the S4. However, if you're really keen on photography, especially mobile photography, and you need to be able to upload them very quickly, then the S4 Zoom could be a really good choice for you. We leave the decision up to yourself. You can find a full written comparison on blog.clove.co.uk, but until next time, thanks for watching.